Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing something that you guys have been asking for a while, which is a mid lane counterpick guide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the champs in mid lane, and I'm going to talk about, I guess, their strengths and weaknesses and what champs I would recommend picking into them. So that'll all be timestamped in the description below if you just want to skip to specific champs. A couple things to kind of get out of the way. First off, comfort is key. So ultimately, you don't really want to counterpick a champ if you don't actually know how to play the counter. It's better off you just pick a champ you're comfortable on and take like a slightly bad matchup or whatever. But the way I'd see it, I guess, is like if you have multiple champs in your pool, this could help you select which one you actually want to go for into certain matchups. Some other things I do have on my Mobafire. If you come over to my Mobafire, which there'll be a link in the description, I do have a bunch of champion guides, and then on those champion guides, if you scroll down, I do have a matchup section, and it'll explain like kind of how to play each matchup. So you can come through. I have that for a bunch of different champs. I actually even have more than that. A bunch of different champs here. So there are, if you want, specific guides, I guess, on how to play the champs, you can do that. There's also normally a matchup section at the end of my YouTube VODs, or sorry, YouTube guides for those champs. There's a matchup sections at the end just with general tier lists, but it doesn't have exactly how to play it. Anyways, let's start off our list with Ahri. So Ahri has a couple big weaknesses that can be countered. One is she's not particularly good in the laning phase, which gives you two different options. You can either play something that is really good in the laning phase, something like a Viktor or an Ori or Syndra or something, and really try and punish Ahri early. This is actually like a really good option, but the downside is you are quite easily ganked. So you do have to be careful of that, playing those immobiles. Now, because you have so much pressure of Ahri, you should be able to set up good vision, but you do still have to be quite aware of the enemy jungle. The other option is to go for some kind of greedy scaling. So you can play something like Vlad or Sylas, something that normally needs to be punished in lane. Because Ahri is just like not really strong enough in lane to actually like push these champions out. She can maybe get control, but unless she snowballs the game, she's probably not going to be able to actually like put you behind. So those are kind of your options into Ahri. Alternatively, you can play something that's very hard to gank just to neutralize her gank setup. So you can play like LeBlanc or Lissandra or something, and just be like, yeah, really hard to gank. I guess you could also play a tank, something like a Cassadin or Galio. It's pretty hard for Ahri to deal with. Akali. So Akali's weaknesses, she has a few. Wave clear is one. Another one is if you're a bit too tanky, she definitely has issues with you. So those would probably be the big ones. You can play for something like Galio that's both tanky and has wave clear. Akali does beat Galio early, but there's definitely a point where she just can't really do much. You can play something like Lissandra for the hard CC. You can definitely play, a tank from another lane. Like you can just play something like a Cassante. Alternatively, there's a few kind of like off meta counters. Like you can go for something like a Rise where you've got, again, quite a lot of tankiness and a lot of push. And finally, I guess you can play just something like LeBlanc, something that has hard CC and that can lock her down. Akshan is another sort of difficult champion to counter. Basically, the best things against Akshan are either strong lane bullies to try and limit his options to move around the map, plus like limit his opportunities to actually trade on you. Even better if you have some sort of CC to either cancel his E or to stop him from just Eing in for free. So examples would be things like Syndra E is quite good. Even Viktor W can be kind of nice. Lux Q, just things to where like if he does come into you, you can either trade on him. Like Cassiopeia W is a good example of that, where if he does jump into you, you can probably punish him on the way out. Or, again, like Syndra E to just like knock him away. If he can't get really good trades with E, then it's mostly just going to be about stopping him from roaming, which should be very possible. Ambessa struggles against a few things. She is punished early by mages, so you can definitely poke her out of lane if you're playing any kind of like strong laning mage. She also needs to chase people down the lane, so if you have some sort of mobility or some sort of self-peel, or the ability to actually just fight back in melee range, like if you are playing a champ with good DPS, you can definitely play into that. So you have a ton of different options into Ambessa. I think I would prefer like something like Cassiopeia is quite good. Again, if you want kind of mobility to make sure you can't get ganked, then like Aurora or something can be solid. But honestly, you can play just about whatever into Ambessa mid. I would say stay away from melees though. Melees generally do kind of get dunked on by Ambessa. Anivia is, there's a couple different win cons you can do into Anivia. So Anivia is very gankable because she is immobile. And a lot of mages do punish her weak laning phase. Particularly pre-6, Anivia is very, very weak in lane. So if you can play some long-range mage, something like, Syndra, Hwei, Xerath, Viktor, even like Ori or something more mid-range, you can get a huge lead over Anivia and then really punish her that way. You do have to be a bit careful because if you don't have a lead at 6, you can definitely start to get punished by that point. But ideally, like you have kind of a solid CS lead and then you can just zone her off. Alternatively, you can play something, you know, melee with gang setup, like you can play something like a Fizz. I would say generally though, it is better to play range into Anivia. Like Anivia is very, very good against short range in, you know, in like team fights and even in lane. So I think longer range plus gang setup, ideally like a Syndra or even a LeBlanc or something, is very, very good. And I would try stay away from anything that is like melee plus no gang setup. Like something like a Talon is probably pretty mediocre. Annie is another champ that I think is actually pretty hard to counter, but I do think that bullying Annie from range is probably the play. So again, strong laning mages, Syndra, Viktor, Ori tend to do quite well into Annie. Again, you do have the gank setup win con, so if you do want to play something like, you know, a Sylas or Ahri, LeBlanc, Fizz, you know, you can play this into Annie, but Annie with her auto range is quite good against melees. So I think longer range is definitely like pretty valuable. Also, if you have mobility yourself, it's kind of good because Annie's gank setup is very solid. Sol is another kind of weird champ where it sort of depends. You either have the tools to beat him or not. So Sol, there's a few things you kind of have to punish. You have to make sure that he can't stack for free. So having a way to either force trades or cancel his Q is really, really valuable. And also the other thing that Sol can do is he can chase you down the lane with his W. So if you end up using all your cooldowns, he can just press W and, well, chase you. So something that can like harass from range and then like has a tool to deny him chasing is really good. So like Syndra, for example, with her E, you can play Ahri with her charm. You can play some mages that can just like disengage. Like an example would be if you're playing like some sort of phase rush mage and you can just like kite out. The worst things against Sol are things that he can just like chase down for free. And the matchup that people used to always play is they'd play Sol into Azir, because the moment Azir committed his soldiers forward, if he wanted to WE away, it cost a ton of mana, and Sol could just chase you down. So yeah, any sort of CC is really good against Sol. Yone is another classic that people like to play. And then yeah, like the Syndra, the Ahri, Zoe, all these are quite good. Aurora, so this is a champ that is kind of terrorizing the game right now because Aurora is extremely OP. There's a couple different directions you can go against Aurora. So the thing with Aurora is she has a really strong laning phase against melees especially. So not bad against range, but it's not great. And she has really good gank setup. So if you want to just punish her 1v1, the best thing to do is to pick a strong laning mage. So again, that would be your Viktor, Syndra, Ori, etc. Now, again, if you're playing that, you have to be very, very careful of getting ganked. So that's why people kind of prefer to play things that are a bit harder to gank. The meta counterpick to Aurora is to play Vlad, because Vlad with TP, D-Shield, Second Wind has the ability to survive the Aurora sustain, and also is like very difficult to gank. So yeah, you kind of have to choose, like, do you want to be immune to ganks or do you want to be immune to her laning phase? Sometimes people play Azir into Aurora because Azir has a reasonably strong lane while also being quite difficult to gank, but it's still not the best. You know, like Aurora can actually punish the Azir lane, especially early, but as the lane goes on, it gets better and better for you. So I don't know, you need to be a bit careful, but that is an option. Generally though, you just want either, again, super strong 1v1 or the ability to avoid ganks. Azir. So Azir has like a lot of different builds, which actually like makes him a lot harder to punish than a lot of other champs, because if you're playing some sort of assassin into Azir, he can easily play like grasp and tank items, and then like you don't really do a whole lot. So probably the best thing to do against Azir is long range. So like there's a lot of weird counterpicks that do well into Azir, you know, stuff like Vel'Koz or even Xerath. Now the scary thing with these champs is that you are very gankable at 6. So I think something like, Syndra is quite good. You can play Ori, except again, you have to be careful at 6, Viktor, and snowball the lane. You definitely can play something like Akali into Azir because you can out-teamfight him, or rather you can out-skirmish him. And you're difficult to gank, you've got a lot of sustain, and you kind of get to scale at least the first few levels for free. So yeah, you can definitely play fighters, like, you know, again, Akali, Sylas, or you want to play probably like long-range mages. All those are pretty solid. Just be aware, I guess, of the gank setup. If he doesn't have a good ganking jungler, you can definitely be a bit greedier with your pick and play something that's like a bit more mobile. But if, you know, they have something like Azir, Jarvan, and Leona, then you probably need to play like an Ahri or a LeBlanc or, you know, Akali or something in order to survive. Brand's a champ you don't see very often, but there's, again, 2 things you can do against Brand. One is to play a D-Shield Second Wind champ. So because Brand has dots, if you play something with D-Shield Second Wind, you can sustain a lot. So something like Yone that has gank set up to punish Brand's immobility is quite good. You can do the same thing with Sylas if you really want. Alternatively, you can play, again, like long-range laning mages, you know, Viktor, Syndra, Ori, etc. It's kind of going to be a stronger laning mage, because if you're playing something like Ahri, for example, where you can't get past the wave to set up ganks, but you also can't trade them, it's going to be kind of miserable. So yeah, be a bit careful of that. Cassio. So Cassio's biggest weakness is definitely being outranged, especially by champs that have a way to stop her from chasing. So for example, like Viktor, even if Cassio hits a Q, she can't really chase because she can't chase into Viktor W or R. Syndra, again, as long as you hold your E defensively, you can poke Cassio out from range, just E her when she gets close. Generally, stronger laning mages are better, so stuff like Ahri that can't really punish Cassio's lane, I don't know, unless you get a lot of ganks, they're probably not that good. So I'd recommend, like, yeah, Syndra, Ori, Hwei, Lux, Viktor. If you're going to play a melee, again, play one with setup. Just a melee champion that doesn't have any gank setup at all is going to struggle versus Cassio, especially if you're like more DPS focused. And also, especially if you can't go D-Shield. So as a melee, D-Shield's very good against Cassio, similar to Brand, because of the damage over time, like ticking multiple times. So yeah, you can play something like Yone with gank setup. If you don't have a ganking jungler, I probably wouldn't. And I'd kind of stay away from things like Talon, because unless the Cassio misplays, you're going to have a really rough time. Cho'Gath really isn't played a whole lot, but the key to Cho'Gath is actually just playing something with good wave clear and reasonable mobility. So, you know, the way you normally die to Cho'Gath is you get like knocked up and, you know, ulted or whatever. Also, he has like a lot of sustains. It's quite difficult to poke him out of lane, but he is kind of vulnerable to wave clear. Like you can just shove him in. I think Hwei is really, really good versus Cho'Gath. I'd actually be really careful of playing things like Rise. Like it's got Rise listed, but I think short range against Cho'Gath is pretty scary, especially when you have to like root yourself in place. So yeah, you can play 80 carries mid and use your fleet movement speed. You can just play for something, yeah, like anything with like a little bit of move speed or a steroid. Like for example, REW is not bad. What else is there? Well, just anything like that, really. Or, you know, things like Ori that can speed yourself up. Just something to be able to kite away. And if you can take Phase Rush, it's kind of nice as well. Corki. So Corki is another, like, pretty decent blind. The best things against Corki are the same things that are good against Akshan, basically. Like, the best Corki trades are when he can W forward into you and chase you down. So anything that can kind of stop that from happening. So again, things like Cinder Stun, Viktor W, Ahri Charm, Zoe Bubble, like all these are quite good against Corki. Corki is really good against champs that don't really have this, and he can just like dive on for free. Or if you need to use that cooldown in order to trade, like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but, you know, for example, if you did have to commit your Zoe E, as opposed to just poking with Q, and then, like, Corki dodges it and can punish, that can be quite scary as well. But, yeah, those are pretty good. If you're going to play an assassin into Corki, I think you kind of want something that's, like, really strong early. Like, you can play LeBlanc into Corki, and you can definitely take advantage of the time when he has tier. You can play Akali and I guess, like, get the free scaling, but you do have to be careful because you can easily go, like, a Hex Drinker or something. I think making him go steel caps is like a little better. You know, like if you're playing something like, I don't know, Talon, like the thing is you do get stat checks, so it's pretty rough to be honest. But like, I don't know, if you can make him go steel caps, then you have a really strong AP jungler, maybe. But I'd say generally, like again, longer range is normally better, or melees with gank setup. Next, we have Diana. Diana is actually a pretty hard champ to counter. You have two options you can go. One is to just pick a lot of CC. So things like Lissandra or LeBlanc can be really, really good against Diana. You can make her life very difficult, especially in any sort of skirmish or team fight. Alternatively, you can pick something that punishes for the opponent coming into you. So something like Cassio can be kind of good. You could even play something like Vex. The only thing is these aren't as good because Diana can just like poke from range. Like her Q poke actually does add up. And I think the things you really want to avoid against Diana is playing some sort of like immobile champ that's like not particularly good in lane. Like something like Talia, I think is definitely pretty rough into Diana. You could do well in team fights, but in the lane would be kind of hard. Stat check melees are quite good as well. So something like a Sylas, Akali, Yone, those are all fine. Ekko. So Ekko's main thing that like makes him good is kind of getting through the laning phase for free or being able to E on top of you with Hail of Blades and you being unable to deal with that. So again, you can go for heavy CC, things like, yeah, Cassio, LeBlanc, Lissandra, all very solid. I would generally stay away from mages unless their mage is very strong early. So like, for example, you could play like Ahri Resolve Viktor and it would be fine. I would probably not play Syndra. You can maybe play Ori with like Ahri and just fight him. like I said, like you kind of need to punish Ekko in lane, so you kind of want to stay away from things like Ahri. You really want to make sure that he is getting punished. And again, stat check melees are quite good in this matchup as well. So Yone, Sylas, etc. Just stay away from anything that like can't pressure laning phase, basically, because Ekko scales insanely well. And so like if you let him get away with it, that's definitely a problem. Fizz is, okay, Fizz, there's a couple things. So one, again, his gank setup is extremely good. So you kind of want something that is ideally ungankable. So like Lissandra is quite good. Galio is very good. LeBlanc is very good. Just things that like you can't die, essentially. Alternatively, you can play something that has like some sort of CC to like punish him on the way out. Like a good example would be, I don't know, maybe like LeBlanc. I mean, I guess I kind of already mentioned that. You do want to stay away from a mobile mages versus Fizz. Even though a mobile mages can beat Fizz 1v1, the gank setup is just too good. So like I would try stay away from like Ori, Syndra, Viktor. I guess you could play Hwei maybe and just like tank it. But really try and stay away from that. I think Mel is really, really good against Fizz because you can either reflect his ult or you can just W to get the immunity on the damage when he E's on you. So like that's a mage option you can play. But yeah, for the most part, you actually don't want to play mages into Fizz. Play something else. Like, yeah, I think LeBlanc, Lissandra, Galio, those seem like the best to me. Garen is a bit of a weird champ. He has an insane amount of sustain and he can't really be poked out of lane. So the best thing you can do against Garen is just be greedy and try pick something with a lot of sustain, or sorry, a lot of scaling. So you can go for things like Azir, Talia, Syndra with like First Strike, Gathering Storm. Just basically as much greed as possible because you're not really going to push him out of lane. You can still play strong lane boys and get prio early. But I think it's really important you do have a scaling champ against Garen. The best things, you know, he's good against are things that kind of like don't scale that well, but also can't pressure him out of lane. So be careful of that. Gragas is basically the same. Gragas is really, really good against melees. So you want something longer range, something that can scale. Punishing lack of wave clear is really good against Gragas. So things like Hwei are very good. You can really punish him. And then like if he ever comes forward into you, you can EQ. But just stay away from melees is the main thing. Longer range, the better. Feels good. Hwei is... Okay, Hwei's kind of weird. Hwei is like a long-range champ, but in lane phase, he's actually not that long range. So Hwei really suffers against other mages. He can neutralize them once he has wave clear, but especially early, it's really tough. So like Vel'Koz, Xerath, Syndra, Ori, Viktor, these are all quite good against Hwei early. If you do want to play a melee, it is kind of difficult, but you kind of have to play for like 2v2 skirmishing. You can play something like an Akali. You can play, it's probably better to play like Sylas or Yone, and that way you have some sort of gank set up and you can like skirmish into him. But I do think longer range, the better. And yeah, I would kind of stay away versus melees if you can, but it's not totally unplayable. Irelia. So this is a difficult champ to counter for sure. So Aurelia's laning phase is pretty much unbeatable. The only way you're going to beat Aurelia 1v1 is by playing a top lane champ. You're going to have to play some sort of top lane melee and end up just like stat checking her essentially. So examples would be, I don't know, something like Jax basically. To be honest though, in mid, what's better off is just like being willing to sack a little bit of CS and play something that's going to be really difficult for her to team fight against. So things like Lissandra, Cassio, LeBlanc, something with a lot of CC, something that's going to make her life very hard. It can be good. You can play Akali. I think Akali's quite good into Aurelia actually. Stay away from like melee DPS, like playing something like Yone's pretty hard. Playing something like Sylas, I'd say, is pretty hard into Aurelia. But yeah, if you can have like ranged CC and just kind of like play to neutralize the lane, normally it will be okay. Jayce is very similar to Corki and Akshan. Jayce is very strong when he can get a Q onto you directly, but he's not very good in lane otherwise. You can poke him out from range, but it's really important that you have the tools to punish him jumping onto you. So stuff like Mel, Viktor, Syndra, Zoe, Ahri, like anything, LeBlanc's another one, anything that has an ability to where like if he Qs forward onto the melees or if he Qs forward onto you, you can punish him on the way out. That's really, really good. Hwei is another good one. But yeah, if you play something without CC, it can be very, very difficult against Jayce. And if you play something that can't really pressure the lane hard against Jayce, he does scale very, very well, while also being like reasonably strong in his Dirk spike. So do be careful of that. But yeah, more CC, the better. If you're going to play melees, I think Yone is not bad. Akali is like okay, but Jayce can like end up going like Eclipse and stuff. Trying to think what else is there. I'd say stuff like Talon and Kiana and stuff is not very good versus Jayce. He can very easily go steel caps, and also he's just like very tanky in general. So burst assassins are normally not that good against Jayce. But like DPS champs or champs that can poke him from range are very, very good. You can play Irelia as well. It's another one I just thought of. Karma, so Karma is really, really strong early, but doesn't scale that well. She kind of scales if her teammates scale. You know, like if she has a fed AD, she can shield them, but Karma herself doesn't do a whole lot. So the best champs to play against Karma are things that can match her strength in laning phase. You can either play like a D-shield champion and look to sustain. The thing is though, like some D-shield champs, like Akali for example, won't teamfight well into Karma because of her shield. So like you could play something like with DPS, like a Yone. You could, is there any other DPS melees? I guess you could play Sylas, yeah, and steal her ult. But realistically, like the things you want to play are again, like I think a Syndra is something that can knock her away when she tries to W is very good. You can play, yeah, I mean, you can play Ahri. You can, I probably wouldn't play LeBlanc, like try and stay away from assassins if possible. But yeah, like long range DPS, especially things that can disengage from her is very, very good. You know, like Aurora knocking herself back away from Karma W, that can be very, very nice. Kassadin. Kassadin, I mean, the obvious one is to just play AD champs. Like, pretty much any AD champ is very, very good into Kassadin. If you're going to play AP, probably play APCC. So again, I'd say, especially something that's, like, strong in the 1v1. Like, Cassio's kind of good versus Kassadin. I guess you could play, like, Viktor or Ori if you really think you can punish the lane. But realistically, it's like, if you're picking into Kassadin, you should try playing AD champ. It does make life a lot easier. But yeah, I don't know, strong 1v1 mages are still playable. I'd try stay away from them though. Katarina. So Katarina is countered mainly by hard CC or tanky champs. So there's a lot of off-meta mids that are very good against Kat. You can play like Garen, you can play Cho'Gath, you can play Cassante. Hard CC mids, so things like Lissandra, Galio can all be played. You can also just play like very strong lane bullies, like things like Aurora that can really bully her. Those can all be pretty solid. Another thing to think about is maybe champs that can rush Hex Drinker, like you can play something like a Corki and kind of bully her and build magic resist. The things you want to avoid is champs that are like very skill shot reliant because she's very mobile, and also immobile because she's just going to jump on you directly. So be careful of champs like Syndra against Katarina. You can play it, but it's not ideal. It's better to have like a bit more guaranteed CC, I suppose. And also, like if you're a really weak laner, something like Veigar, you can definitely be punished pretty hard. So try and stay away from that. Kayle, the main secret is just like outranging and poking. So I think Syndra is really good against Kayle because you scale, honestly, like just as well as Kayle, but you can like poke her out. You can eat her away if she tries to chase. Cassio is also quite good. Azir is another one. Like anything that can keep kind of Kayle at range, keep her off you, and you don't have to go into is really, really good. Also be aware that Kayle will often be paired with like a jungler like a Hecarim or something that she wants to ult. And so like if you're playing a burst champ, that can be kind of rough into that because she'll shield your burst. If you're playing DPS though, it doesn't matter too much. So yeah, you can kind of stay away from that. And mostly as long as you punish her in lane, it should be fine. Like you just don't want to give her free scaling essentially. It should be pretty easy. LeBlanc. So LeBlanc, yeah, LeBlanc's a weird one. Like LeBlanc is very, very strong in lane against just about everything. The real secret to LeBlanc is actually just taking a rune. It's taking bone plating in your secondaries. Very, very good against LeBlanc because it's difficult for her to proc it with an auto unless you're melee. If you're playing melee, just play second wind. But if you're playing range, take bone plating. Make it so she has to either W auto or just like W to break your bone plating. And what that means is like you get a 15-second cooldown out of her that you can punish and regain control. So if you want to beat LeBlanc in the 1v1, strong laning mages like Viktor or Ori can definitely do it. There are some certain interactions that can be good. Like, for example, you can Syndra E to knock back LeBlanc's LeBlanc's W. You can play things, you know, like Lissandra and just like Ultra in team fights. You can play like Rise and punish her wave clear. The thing you have to be really aware of though is like LeBlanc has probably the single best gank setup in the entire game. So like if you are playing one of those immobile champs, you've got to be very, very careful not to get ganked. My preference is to just play Lissandra and like you'll go down a little bit behind in lane, but you like force her to buy mercs, or you can just like alter every fight, which feels really good. Yeah, if you're gonna play melee, like any kind of D shield champ is okay. The thing is, like a lot of them are punished for lacking mobility, or like rather getting chain CC by LeBlanc. Like you probably wouldn't want to play Yone or Akali or anything. But if you can play like a Cassandra or something, yeah, that's very solid. But for the most part, just like CC or strong lane, those are kind of like what you want to look for. Lissandra, again, two options. So against Lissandra, her 1v1 laning is not that good. So you can either play something that's really, really strong in lane and look to punish. Alternatively, you can kind of play greedy scaling because she can't really punish you in lane. So like if you want to play something like a Sylas, you know, she can't really push you out of lane. You could, I don't know, I'm not trying to go for Kayle, but you know, you could play something like a Vlad, and again, like she can't really punish in lane. And those champs are like kind of immune to her gang setup. The thing is, she's still gonna like pressure the map a lot. So that's why I would tend to play like longer range probably, and then like just try avoid the ganks and punish her. But yeah, I mean, you can play something that's very difficult to gank. Something like a Sylas, I think, is very, very good. Or, I mean, Syndra's kind of nice because you can like knock her back when she goes for her E, and then like maybe you can dodge it. But it is pretty hard. Like, it's just kind of a... Lissandra's going to have good gank setup no matter what, so it's not like there's anything that's truly invincible to ganks, but those are probably the things that are better. Lux. Two choices against Lux, either like melee gank setup basically, or extreme long range again. So if you're playing a champ like Syndra or what's another one? Syndra Viktor, like these champs do beat Lux early. The thing is, Lux quite quickly gets to a point where she can neutralize, which is kind of annoying. But I would say that you outscale her anyways. So like Lux is mainly an annoyance rather than being like extremely OP. And yeah, melee gank setup is quite good, like Sylas again, Yone, Fizz. Anything that can like set up ganks or like punish her like by chasing her down the lane is quite good. The worst things against Lux are things that need to dash forward, so things like Jayce or Corki or I don't know, anything that needs to like go forward into her kind of predictably, that really suffers against Lux. Okay, Malphite. So Malphite's pretty annoying. Malphite has really good Q poke in lane, and he also ends up quite tanky, and he really punishes immobilities. So probably the best champ into Malphite is to play something like Lissandra, because like you have good gank setup onto him, you're also very hard to kill yourself, and you can make his life very difficult in team fights. I'd probably stay away from a mobile mages unless you really think you can punish the lane. You know, something like Ori does blast Malphite 1v1, but again, you've got to be so careful of him at level 6, especially with his jungler. So yeah, I think things like Aurora, Lissandra are very good. Obviously, a melee like Sylas is amazing. You can steal his ult, plus like you're tank enough in order to sustain through him. It's very possible just to play tanks as well. Like if you want to play something like Akali or something that has some sort of inbuilt sustain, that's completely fine as well. AD carry mids are okay against Malphite as long as they scale. Like for example, you can play Smolder versus Malphite. You can build some sustain, but I probably wouldn't play like something like a Jayce. Like that can definitely be pretty rough. So yeah, mobility basically is good, and some way to avoid just getting like ulted and instantly killed is good. You can play kind of like tankier things as well, like a Swain. It can be kind of nice because like he can't one-shot you, and then like if he doesn't one-shot you, you win the DPS, I guess. So that's kind of nice. You win that sustain battle. So Malz is an insanely greedy pick. Malz can be punished very hard in the lane. He's extremely weak before he gets chapter, and almost any champ should be making it so that he doesn't get chapter. The perfect pick into this is something like Syndra, something that like punishes a lane plus scales really well. Smolder is very, very good as well because you can easily get stacks off his pets. Probably you just want to avoid playing champs that are punished by lack of wave clear and also have a hard time like really punishing him early. Like a champ like Ahri, you can still punish, but it's definitely not as good. You want to play something with more pressure. So any strong laning mage, again, like Viktor, Syndra, whatever, you can play greed yourself as long as it's long range greed, you know, because like you don't want to just play something melee and then just get ulted. And definitely stay away from like anything like a Akali or like something where he can just like DPS you down in a team fight. It's normally not the best. Mel is, I would say, okay, obviously we don't know for sure because she hasn't been out that long, but I would say the best things against Mel are spammable low CD abilities. So things like Ori Q is very good, or Viktor E harass, Syndra Q harass. Anything that kind of has to like harass like less often but more powerfully. Something like LeBlanc is normally bad against Mel because she can just W in order to remove the damage. So yeah, I think specifically like those low CD spammable abilities are really, really good. I think Yone is like not bad because you do have some ganks up and you have a lot of sustain. Akali is okay. The thing is like she can reflect like the E2 and stuff, which is kind of bad. I think most of the ADs, like AD melees, are generally not good. Like Kiana or Talon, like I think they're just too punishable. Also, like you can reflect Kiana, which is not the best. So yeah, I'd probably just go for one of those mages that I mentioned before. Maybe you can play something like, yeah, Akali, Yone potentially, but it's not that great, I don't think. Neferi. So Neferi is one of those champs similar to a lot we've talked about where her main trading pattern is just stat checking you by being able to jump on you. So when Neferi Ws you, if you have a tool to either cancel this, for example, Syndra E, or if you are a strong stat checker on your own and you can just fight her back, something like Sylas, or if you can like CC her at the other end. Like for example, you can you can Ahri charm at the right time to cancel Neferi W, but like you can just Zoe bubble her at the other side and then you'll probably win the trade anyway. So yeah, CCs are great. You can play LeBlanc, Lissandra, Syndra, even Viktor's not bad. Hwei is quite good. Anything that like stops her from Wing on you for free is really good. If you don't have any CC, it's definitely a little harder, but potentially if you take Phase Rush, it can be okay. You know, something like Ori, if you can just like Phase Rush away, you do scale quite well. So yeah, I guess that's something to be aware of. Neeko. Yeah, Neeko's kind of weird. Neeko's really strong in lane, but doesn't scale that well. I think having a knockback is really nice against Neeko to kind of knock her back from her ulti. So I think Syndra is really good in a Neeko. I think a lot of melees, if they have sustain, can be good. But the thing is, like, if the Neeko root is really good against your champ, that can be pretty rough. But like, yeah, you can play something like a Sylas and steal her ult as long as you don't get punished too hard in lane. I think, yeah, things like Syndra and Hwei to me are the best because you can easily just like knock her back. I would probably not play anything that needs to dash into her, so definitely no AD carry mid, definitely nothing like LeBlanc, nothing that is going to just get E'd for free. Ori. So Ori is actually a pretty hard champ to counter mid. Ori is countered more by support and jungle just because she's a mobile. So probably the best things to play against Ori is either you can play like super sustained, so you can play like an Akali, Yone, or Sylas, and just play to like, yeah, basically weather the storm, set up some ganks, play for skirmishes. If you do want to play a mage into Ori, you're probably looking for something really strong, something like Syndra or Viktor. It's basically got to be something that really pressures the lane because she's also ridiculously strong in lane. You can play, yeah, kind of like some gank setup champs like LeBlanc, but you actually do lose the 1v1. Same with Ahri, like you really lose the 1v1. So if I had any choice, I'd probably go Viktor, but you kind of do need to factor in what else they're playing. Like if they're playing, say, Ori plus Nocturne, you kind of have to play something like LeBlanc or Akali because otherwise you're just not going to be able to live. But yeah, if it's pure isolated 1v1, you can play some other mage and Punisher. There are also things like Aurelia, which is quite good into Ori. It's like really hard matchup. But I'd say for the most part, Ori actually beats melees. And so you probably want to play like a longer range instead, something that can just like play, yeah, from far away. Pantheon has a very binary trading pattern. It's basically like, yeah, if he can W on you, he normally wins the trade. Anything that can cancel this or CC him is great. So Hwei EQ, Syndra E, Viktor W, Zoe Bubble, Ahri Charm, like all of these are very good against Pantheon. Pantheon is very good against other melees that he can just W on immediately. Some melees are okay, like I think Akali being able to E away from his W, for example, is not too bad. But be very careful, I think, of picking melees into Pantheon. Normally, the longer range, the better. The more CC, the better as well. It can be really hard for Pantheon to do anything unless he finds some big snowball. So normally, that'll be fine. Like, even if you go down a bit of CS, it's probably fine. To be honest, though, if you're playing the right champ, you probably actually can end up in a reasonable spot. Kiana. So Kiana is quite weak in lane, but she's a really good skirmisher. Her gank setup is okay. Probably the best things to play against Kiana is you can either match her in the skirmish and play some really strong skirmisher like a LeBlanc, like a Lissandra or something, or play something that's like ridiculously strong in 1v1 and just like beat the fuck out of her, basically. You can play a Viktor, you can play an Ori. I'd say try and stay away from champs with lots of skill shots like Syndra, just because Kiana does have a lot of mobility and can chase you down. I'd say playing against Kiana, though, is like less about the champ and more about like how you play around it, like making sure that you, for example, keep the wave like in the middle post 6 and try and keep up some pressure so that she can't get roams for free. The worst things against Kiana are things that just like let her roam for free or like don't punish her lane. So if you play anything that's like weak early, it's definitely going to be rough. So try and counterpick with something that puts pressure on the lane. Quinn's another stat check champ where she kind of needs to be able to E on you to win trades, or she needs to be able to like push mid and then roam a lot. So it's really good if you can play something like Hwei or Syndra and just EQ her off you constantly. You can play something like an Ori, but it does lose early. Eventually it starts to win though. But really be careful of playing a champ without CC, because if Quinn can just trade on you for free, it's really bad. If you play a champ without wave clear, it's also very bad. So just be thinking like, okay, you want to pressure the lane, you want to stop her from eating on you, and you want to kind of like stop her from roaming for free. Anything that kind of meets those conditions is fine. Other AD carries, I would say, not the best normally. And anything short range generally gets punished. Anything without CC gets punished. Ryze. So Ryze has two big weaknesses. One is he's relatively short range, so he generally does get poked out by longer range mages. Things like Hwei, Viktor, Syndra can all be very good, especially champs with CC, because Ryze has to root himself in order to, fight back. So that guarantees your CC. Ryze also kind of struggles against DPS melees that can chase him down that he can't actually beat in melee range. So you can play Irelia and Yone, and that's quite good. You definitely don't want to play anything kind of mid-ranged, or champs that get punished for lacking wave clear definitely suck against Ryze. But yeah, CC, range, or DPS, that's basically what you're looking for. Smolder is a very weird champion. Smolder is, I think, countered by range that he can't really buy boots against. So, for example, you can buy mercs against Syndra, but you can't really buy mercs against Viktor or Ori. There's no real way to dodge that harass. They can just poke you over and over and over. So I think that's definitely the scariest thing for a Smolder. You can also play some greedy scaling of your own. For example, if you do want to go something like a Yone or an Akali or something, that's okay. The thing is, Smolder does outscale you though. So you're really, I guess, reliant on getting a lot done in the mid game. So yeah, I think if it was just Smolder blind, I'd pretty much always go for Viktor if I can, or Ori and play for the team fight, or just something that puts some pressure on him. Even if you can't stop Smolder from scaling, if you can make Smolder kind of slow down in order to buy defensives, for example, if you can make him buy a Hex Drinker, or you can make him buy mercs, or do something that isn't just him building straight damage items, that's the best. You definitely don't want to play any melee assassin, I don't think. Yeah, stuff like Kiana, Talon, or, tanks like Galio are really bad for Smolder. You definitely want range, I think, if possible, or just a shit ton of threat. Swain's pretty easy. Two things you can do against Swain. One is match him for the DPS, so you can play Sylas, you can play Yone, you can play Irelia, you can play Cassio, and just fight him basically in melee range. The other thing to do is play ranged with CC, so something to where if he chases you, you can just get him off you. So Hwei EQ, Viktor W, Syndra Stun, all those sorts of things. Swain is really, really good against AP champs, and AD champs. Champs that either can't out DPS him, but also can't push him out of lane. So he's really good against most of the assassins, like Kiana's and Talent and stuff. He's quite good against things like Ahri, because they just can't put enough pressure down to actually kill him. She can charm you, but ultimately it just doesn't matter a whole lot. But yeah, so it's DPS champs or long range CC tends to be kind of hard. Sylas, another very weird champ. So Sylas is countered by things that either can match him for DPS, so you can play Cassio, for example, or you can play Irelia, to where if you do E on them as Sylas, you can punish them. The thing is, I think at a very high level, just because of Sylas's gank setup, Cassio actually loses to Sylas, I would say. But honestly, in most elos, Cassio will win. You can definitely play things like, Anivia, things that are just going to make his life really difficult. You can also play champs where he doesn't have a good ult to steal. So Talia, you'll probably lose a little bit early, but you're really good in fights. Corki's another good one. Zoe is really good. Things like LeBlanc, to where you can chain him if he goes in, are very, very nice as well. You just want to kind of stay away from champs that don't have a way to kind of set up any ganks on him, and also can't stop him from getting on you. Particularly champs that are weak in lane. That can be really, really hard. You need to kind of keep Sylas down, or at least stop him from snowballing. And ideally, if you can keep him off you as well, that's very, very valuable. Syndra. So a few counters to Syndra. One is gank setup. So anything with gank setup can be good. You can play something like a Fizz, you can play LeBlanc, you can play Sylas. Any of these things basically is really, really good. If you want to just play for pure 1v1, I think something like Irelia is very good. You can play Zed as long as you take D shield. Generally stay away from weak laners against Syndra, because Syndra is quite good in lane herself and scales very, very well. If you want to play ranged against Syndra, you kind of just have to play something that's very strong in lane as well, something like a Viktor or an Ori. The thing is though, Syndra has a very good gank setup, so you've got to be quite careful of these. I think if you have your pick of the litter, it's you pick Yone with the ganking jungler, you play Irelia for 1v1, or you play Zed, or you play Akali for the sustain. Akali is really, really good because you can sustain her basically, and you do well in skirmishes. The thing is though, Syndra does put a scaling win condition pressure on you, because she does scale very well. So you kind of have to decide, do you want to match the scaling and go for something really, scaling like yourself, like a Viktor? Or do you think you can take control of her early, with one of these lane counters? Talia. So Talia, there's a few things you can do. Talia is pretty weak in lane, but she scales extremely well. So you're trying to find some way to punish that. While you can match scaling, I'd say Talia's scaling is better than just about anything. So ideally, you don't do that. If you're going to play melee, you want to play a melee that isn't super dash reliant. So Something like Yasuo, for example. Even though Yasuo wins the lane against Talia, it's pretty hard in the fights. I'd play something like Katarina can be good. Zed's really good. You can play something like Fizz that has gang set up. Those are all nice. Kassadin's actually very, very good against Talia. Like, if there's a Kassadin matchup, it's probably Talia. Alternatively, again, strong laning mages, Syndra, Viktor, Ori, especially ones with gang setup can be quite good. You can play things like LeBlanc. Even though they're dash reliant, you can normally punish early. So yeah, Talia's kind of like either pick a greedy pick or pick something that can just shit on her in lane and really snowball. Talon, I think Talon's pretty weak, to be honest, against most things. Talon, it's like you need to kind of have a champ that is strong enough to stop him from roaming for free, right? Like, you need to keep control of the wave while also like not making yourself super vulnerable. So again, any of the strong laning mages are probably fine as long as you control your wave correctly. Like, don't be too far pushed after like level, I don't know, 2 or 3 or so. Or especially post 6. If you want to just play something easy, yeah, like a Swain, Lissandra, Galio, Cassandra, you know, anything that's tanky is really difficult for Talon. But it's, yeah, again, it's not just about not dying to him. It's about having enough pressure to stop him from moving. AD carry mids are actually not bad versus Talon because most of them have very good stats, like Triss. You can take bone plating, and if he roams, you can like pressure the turret. But there are windows to die if you mess them up. It's kind of like high risk, high reward. For the most part, though, yeah, again, anything tanky, anything that builds health, CC obviously is quite nice. Tristana. Tristana is one of those champs like most other ADs where you just need to be able to punish her jumping in. So Syndra E is very good against this. Hwei EQ, Viktor W and R, Lux Q. What's another one? Ahri Charm is okay. The thing is, like, Triss can just like shove Ahri into turret. LeBlanc's not that good because, again, LeBlanc just like lacks wave clear. So the best thing is like a mage with high wave clear, ideally range, and the ability to stop Triss jumping on you. So the very best matchups, I'd say, are Hwei and Triss. You can play things like Aurora, and it's like okay, but you get punished for your lack of wave clear. Definitely don't want anything with low wave clear against Triss because you'll get punished very, very hard. TF is weak in lane, but he's got very good gank set up, and he will definitely look to pressure other lanes. So you can go for something greedy against TF. Like, if you want to play something like Kassadin, you can. The thing is, like, you're kind of saying, like, can my team keep it together, I guess, while you scale for free? I think it's better to play something that like pressures the lane and scales, especially something that's like hard to gank. So like Trist is good because like Trist, if TF roams, you can punish the turret. If you do get ganked, you can easily W away or even buffer the stun. Yeah, that's quite good. Most AD carry mids are very good against TF, especially because like they don't mind building mercs so much as mages do. And then, yeah, mages, I mean, there's a lot of good ones. So things like Ahri to match the wave clear, fine. Strong laners, Ori, Hwei, Syndra, etc. are all fine. Viktor, obviously. Just be careful, again, of what he's getting paired with. Because, like, if it's TF plus Jarvan, TF plus Leon or whatever, you definitely need to think about mobility a little more. You can easily match TF with, like, Lissandra or something, or Sylas, and, you know, you're pretty safe while also having a lot of pressure. So that's all fine. Veigar. Veigar is a weird champ again. So Veigar is really, really good in short range. I'd actually say Veigar is like very misunderstood. I don't think Veigar actually scales that well. He's very, very good in the mid game because at this time, like champs are not that tanky and like range is not that big an issue. But ultra late game, Veigar really struggles with range, and early game he also struggles because he can get punished in lane so hard. So you can play an assassin and try snowball the lane on the map. Things like Katarina obviously can be very good. You can play push and move champs. Basically anything is free, Talia, TF, whatever. Alternatively, like longer range mages to stay out of cage range and also to punish him in the later stages of the game. Just your typical mages, like basically whatever. Yeah, you can play some melees even that get CC'd, stuff like Yone, just because it's like free scaling, so why not? Veigar I think is very easy to pick and do. Basically just don't pick something that can't punish early and is short range. That's kind of what you want to stay away from. Vel'Koz. Two options against Vel'Koz. Gank setup is one, so like anything with a lot of mobility plus gank setup is very good. LeBlanc, obviously, Irelia, Sylas, Yone, these are all great. If you want to play a mage, countering Vel'Koz as a mage is actually kind of hard. I think something with CC is kind of good. Something to cancel his ult, basically. So like Cinder Stun is good. I think Viktor can definitely cancel it. Hwei is not that good because he's kind of short range. And you ideally do want to pressure Vel'Koz in lane. Like something like Ahri is definitely not that great. And like if Vel'Koz scales for free, he does scale quite well. And he is like reasonably strong in lane too. So be a bit careful that you do want to place some sort of pressure onto him early. Vex. So countering Vex is a few different ways. One is there's some like specific niche interactions, like for example, using Talia to really punish Vex if she ever tries to R in can be quite good. Vex is also just like not the strongest laner in general, so anything that's kind of a good laner will generally punish Vex. Vex also is not that great at actually killing people unless you really misplay, so you can play something like a little greedier, especially something with wave clear. Personally, my picks into Vex, I'd probably go like Syndra for the lane pressure, Talia for scaling if you want. You can definitely play, you can play melees, but be a little careful because like if you play something like a Yone and don't have a ganking jungler, then like Vex is pretty happy. Something like Yone or LeBlanc with the ganking jungler is fine. I wouldn't pick it into Vex, but if you end up with it, it's okay. But yeah, longer range, Viktor, Hwei, Syndra, these are all pretty good. Viktor. So Viktor's another champ that is like mostly countered by support and jungle. Like Viktor's very hard to beat 1v1, but like if your jungler and support pick ganking champs, it is quite hard for him. I would say if you want to play a mage, probably something like Syndra or Ori is good. Both of them have like a reasonable gank setup and are also quite strong in lane themselves. You can play Hwei and try neutralize, but I do think the matchup is pretty hard. Melees with D shield can be good, so I think like Yone is pretty good, Akali is pretty good. You know, you can play Sylas with the right jungler, but I'd be very careful of doing it 1v1. So yeah, this is the kind of champ where you just sort of need to pick like based on what your team is picking, or just pick comfort, or again, like pick someone to neutralize. Beating Viktor 1v1 is extremely hard, but he does suffer in skirmishes and stuff, so you can punish him there. Vlad, a couple big weaknesses. One is lack of wave clears, so like anything that can like really push him in over and over is quite good. So you can play something like a Hwei, you can play Rise, you can play Talia. The thing is though, like if you ever, you know, kind of lose control of the wave and he's able to start zoning you off, that can be really, really rough. DPS champs are also quite good. So a champ like, again, Rise is very good for fighting him. Cassio is pretty good for this. Yeah, DPS melees are also solid, like Irelia, Yone, etc. Worst thing is probably just letting Vlad scale for free. Try not to play something that just like AFK scales. Like I wouldn't play something like a Malz. I wouldn't play something like a Veigar. Probably wouldn't play a Smolder. Like you really got to put some pressure on him. You can also go for like Ignite cheeses. Like for example, Zoe and Aurora can take Ignite and just like try and kill him. That's an option as well. Xerath. Xerath, yeah, Xerath's kind of weird. I think ganks it up, obviously, just because he's a mobile is very good. So you can play, yeah, kind of your Aurelias. You can play your Sylas, your Fizz, all these sorts of things. Be careful, though, because like with Xerath E, if you try and dash on him, he can obviously E you off. Most long-range mages are decent versus Xerath. So you can play something like, you can play Syndra, you can play Ori. You should be able to win early. Hwei's not that good. Viktor's pretty good. You can play gank setup, you know, you can play something like Lissandra, but you will lose the 1v1, so you're really trying to, I don't know, you'd be like consciously sacking the lane to like try and pressure. Probably the worst things against Xerath are things that kind of can't do either. Like if you don't win 1v1 and you don't have good gank setup and you're kind of just sitting there getting poked, that's definitely not very valuable. So try and stay away from anything like that. Yasuo, a very, very hard champ to beat 1v1 unless you're willing to play some sort of top lane champ. Mostly you want to just pick CC and make his life very difficult. So things like, well, yeah, you can easily play something like a Renekton, you can play Pantheon, yeah, Annie, Sod, Cassio, Vex, Lissandra, LeBlanc. Lissandra's really good because Yasuo kind of struggles to build Mercs, and if you make him take Cleanse, like that's very good. So I like Lissandra, but there are a lot of options. I think you should mainly be picking to make his life difficult in teamfights as opposed to beat him 1v1. LeBlanc and Akali are probably the closest things to beating in 1v1. You can definitely go for those if you want, but I would say generally playing for the CC is probably better. Yone. Yone is another pretty hard champ to counter. I think that like the best matchup into Yone, I think, is LeBlanc because it's something that can put on pressure early and has CC. The thing you have to be careful of is that like even the champs that pressure him in the 1v1 are often very gankable, right? Like if you play something like a Syndra or you play an Ori, Viktor, etc., there is a point where you'll probably get ganked or you'll like really suffer on the side lane. So I think having something that has mobility is quite nice. Probably, yeah, the single best matchups, I think LeBlanc is quite good. You can play Lissandra, same reason, like Yone can't really build Mercs, same as Yasuo. You can play Irelia, is very, very good in the 1v1. You can like play champs like Syndra and play to outscale, but then just like be very careful of getting ganked. Like you can definitely outscale in a team fight, but the skirmishes and the side lane are going to be pretty hard. But yeah, the more CC, the better, basically. Zed, Zed is, yeah, Zed's kind of strange as well. So Zed is surprisingly strong early, and he also is like very good at 1v1. There are champs that like have CC against Zed, but then like kind of just fall too far behind, it doesn't matter. Like you can play Lissandra versus Zed, but I think you'll actually suffer so much in the lane that it's not really worth it. I'd say any kind of like off-meta champ is actually quite good. Like again, your Garen, Cassante, you know, what else is there? Like a Cho'Gath, something that's like very tanky is good. Bruisers, or I guess like melee bruisers that can fight things like Akali, things like Sylas, Yone are all not bad. If you are going to play range, I think range with mobility is good. LeBlanc is quite nice. Normally just like the melees that kind of, or sorry, the range that are immobile do have it a little rough. You can play stuff like Viktor and try and stat check. That is good, but just be aware again, the skirmishes are pretty rough. Side lane, unless you build a little defensively like Sylas and stuff, can also be quite rough. Ziggs is countered mainly by range or sustain. So Ziggs' main thing is he wants to kind of like push you in and press you on a turret, try to take your plates, and then scale. But if you play a mage that can stop this, like deny any plates getting taken, try put him behind any of the strong laning mages that I've mentioned, your Syndra, Ori, Viktor, Hwei, etc., those are all solid. Melees with high sustain from D-Shield, or, you know, like a lot of mobility to actually pressure the Ziggs are all fine. Ganks up, of course, is great. You probably just want to stay away from things that are like kind of short range and can't pressure that well. Like a thing like Ahri, for example, is definitely not that great against Ziggs unless you receive a lot of ganks. So long range mages or ganks up / sustain melees. Finally, Zoe. Zoe's a real annoying champ to play against because she can very easily just like coin flip a fight basically and get a bunch of kills. The best things against Zoe are there's a lot of melees are quite good. Not all of them though. So like melees that have to go in and immediately get bubbled are not great. You can play Yone and cancel the bubble. Also you have good ganks up. That's quite good. You can play Akali, use your move speed to dodge things. Probably wouldn't play Sylas. That's basically a guaranteed bubble. Most of the melee AD assassins, not that great. I mean, you could play something like a Talon maybe and try and get a kill, but you're just as likely to die. Or you can go long range, again, like long range bullies, things like Viktor, things like, I guess, like, yeah, Ori, Syndra. Gang setup is good, right? So if a Syndra is quite good. But yeah, that would basically be it. So probably, I guess, like final thoughts, again, like try prioritize comfort. And obviously I haven't mentioned like literally every champ in the game in here. And that's partially because like, obviously I'm going to talk more about like my pool, like things I play. But hopefully I've given you guys enough of an idea of like generally what each champ struggles with. And like you can play some off-meta champs into these, you know, like there is definitely, I think I kind of limited the amount of things I said, like in terms of champs. Like I don't think, for example, that I ever said that like Talon was a counter to anything. But like, for example, you could play Talon into things that don't really pressure the lane, right? Because if you get a free lane as Talon and can pressure the map, that's really, really good. So yeah, I guess if you have specific questions, put them in the comment section below and I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, yeah, just try and think about like kind of what I said, what the champs are weak at, what your champ is good at, and hopefully you'll be able to find some sort of matchup that's good. Generally, though, again, just lock in your comfort. It's probably going to be the best, but hopefully this points you in the right sort of direction. Maybe if there's one champ you're really struggling with all the time, you can look for something like that. I guess one final thing is, if you're really not sure about meta champs especially, is you can come over to Games of Legends and you can like look at certain matchups being played. For example, like, I don't know, if we search like Viktor, we could probably see like matchups that Viktor is being played in. So there's like, a lot of this is just going to be meta, right? But what you can do is like, you could come find these games on YouTube and just see like, did they pick these into Viktor? Did Viktor pick into them? And also like, again, some of it is just like, these are the stronger champs, so these are going to be picked more often. But yeah, that's definitely something you can think about, is you can come and kind of like steal the meta matchups at least from what's being played in pro. So yeah, I think that's going to be it. Any other questions, guys, please leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Come check out my stream. See you in the next one.